All right, it is noon. Happy Valley time. Welcome to the virtual speaker series. I see the Zoom room is filling up. As always, we encourage you to let us know who you are and where you're zooming in from today. Go ahead and put that information in the chat so we can welcome you in to today's virtual speaker session. We have a great program lined up. Today, we're talking with Dr. Greg Pavlak. He's going to talk about the work that he's doing in Penn State's Architectural Engineering program and talk about smart buildings and all the good work he's doing there. I see Mark from PSFEI and Tim Carr down in Research Triangle Park, North Carolina. Steve Wagman tuning in from Bluebell, Pennsylvania. Jim Delark, class of 66 tuning in. Good to see you, Jim. Brian Edwards in Camp Hill. Thanks for tuning in today. We will be getting started in just a minute. I see Charlie Wayne from Shamokin. We were just talking off camera about the coal region where I grew up, Charlie, and you're right there in the heart of the coal region of Pennsylvania. I see Laura from OPP. Good to see you today, Laura. Again, welcome everybody into the virtual speaker series featuring Dr. Greg Pavlak. He's an assistant professor of architectural engineering here at Penn State. I see Mercedes from State College is joining us. Good to see you. Welcome in. We'll be getting started here in just a minute. Where else would you rather be than a Zoom full of Penn Staters? I'm Paul Clifford, CEO of the Penn State Alumni Association, and I'd like to welcome everybody to today's virtual speaker session, which is being recorded. Live closed captions are available for this event. You can access them by clicking the closed caption button at the bottom of your Zoom video window, and then clicking Show Subtitle. You can also customize your caption view by clicking the stream text link, which is posted in the chat. We are live streaming today's presentation, and this live stream has been made possible through the gracious support of a donor and the Fund for Access, Ideas, and Audacious Goals. Today's presentation will be archived and available on our website after the event. This afternoon, we welcome Dr. Greg Pavlak, an assistant professor of architectural engineering at Penn State. He has 10 years of experience in predictive modeling and optimal control of building, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems. Buildings play an enormous role in our everyday lives and present an important opportunity to promote the sustainability and well-being of society. This talk will highlight key areas where smart building technologies can help address pressing climate change-related issues. Solutions being developed within Penn State's architectural engineering will be discussed along with several challenges and barriers to adoption of such technologies. Dr. Pavlak's current work focuses on developing of intelligent control technologies for buildings to lower their operational carbon emissions and increase the utilization of renewable energy. Prior to Penn State, he served as the lead scientist for a startup company commercializing model predictive building controls. He held an BS in engineering from Hope College in Holland, Michigan, and a PhD in architectural engineering from the University of Colorado Boulder. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Pavlak.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining, and thanks for the introduction, Paul. I'd like to just thank the Alumni Association for the invitation to share more about the work that I'm doing and that's going on here in the architectural engineering department. So how do the slides look? Is this okay?
They look great.
Okay, wonderful. As Paul said, I I did my bachelor's degree at Hope College in Michigan, and then went to the University of Colorado for my graduate degree in architectural engineering, and then spent a couple of years working for Q Coefficient, trying to commercialize some of these advanced building technologies. And it was 2017 when I was able to join Penn State Architectural Engineering. So today, I'd like to talk more about our work in smart buildings generally, and with a focus on sustainability. So for those that aren't familiar and don't work in this space, very frequently, buildings are a significant consumer of energy, and more specifically electricity. So if we looked at kind of the global energy picture, buildings are a fairly large piece of the pie. Heating, turns out, is the largest single end use at 36%. Cooling is the fastest growing end use. So there's a lot of emerging economies that are taking advantage and using refrigeration and cooling technologies. And all of this electricity consumption is really contributing substantially to the global carbon emissions. So 28% of global carbon emissions is associated with building operations. So this is sort of the day-to-day activity and energy use in buildings. And then 11% is in the building materials themselves and the construction phase. So if we want to really address some of these pressing climate issues, we have to consider buildings as a prime sector for improvement. And there's a lot of opportunities today, and I hope to highlight some of those opportunities to improve the building sector today. And so with sort of the carbon and environmental greenhouse gas emissions taking center stage recently, and over the past several years, we're seeing a lot of targets being established. So recently, discussions at the federal level have been 50 to 52% reduction in greenhouse gas pollution by 2030, carbon pollution-free power sector by 2035, and then net zero emission economy no later than 2050. And so these are not just buildings, right? These are overall emission targets. If we looked at the state of Pennsylvania, the most recent climate action plan had I believe 26% greenhouse gas reduction by 2025, with 80% by 2050. And then there's a lot of various local implementations. For example, if we looked at buildings, the city of Denver have set goals for net zero energy and all electric new homes for the 2024 building code. And then same all electric net zero criteria for commercial buildings in the 2027 building code. And then in New York City, local law 97 has established emission intensity limits for buildings over 25,000 square feet. And so these are limits in terms of metric tons of carbon equivalents per square foot of the building that will be enforced. And so I think these all just sort of highlight the need to now identify tangible strategies and pathways to achieving these targets, right? In first specific buildings, and then communities as a whole. And so before we move on and talk about the details, I think this is a common question that comes up. What are smart buildings? So I think smart buildings can help us address these climate and energy issues, but what do we mean when we say smart buildings? And I think really the important thing here is that it's hard to define because the definition is always changing, right? So this is kind of a moving target as technologies become widely adopted. Maybe we no longer consider them smart. They're sort of the state of the art, or the baseline technology. And so the definition's always been changing. I think if you looked back 30 to 40 years, smart would have been defined as buildings that are automated, so they can kind of manage their own systems. There's minimal human intervention. in terms of scheduling and turning systems on and off and making sure they're working as needed. So I think, we would have kind of made smart synonymous with automated. Now, I think one definition that's proposed by the ASHRAE Handbook of Applications. So ASHRAE is formerly the American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning Engineers. It's the professional society. Publishes many standards and guidelines for buildings. And I should say this isn't really a definition. This is more of an introductory paragraph taken out of the handbook. But some of the key criteria that they note are that smart buildings exhibit characteristics analogous to human intelligence, maybe drawing conclusions from data, making decisions, taking action autonomously without being programmed. So you can see that we've kind of moved from things just being automated now to things maybe being more human-like, more autonomous. And I picked the 2015 version. There is a new version of the handbook out there, but the 2015 version is where this chapter on smart building systems first appeared. So it's kind of grown in popularity and become kind of a whole topic in and of itself over the last 5 to 10 years. And so as often happens, when things are sort of hard to define or you don't have a clear answer, what do? You might ask your colleagues, right? And so I did the same thing here. I asked my colleagues in the Penn State Architectural Engineering department, what do smart buildings mean to them, or what is their idea of a smart building? And so I want to spend the next handful of slides just sharing their responses. And I think what this will do is also introduce some of the work that they're doing in this area, because there is a lot going on here in terms of smart buildings. And so first, my colleagues, Rebecca, JP, and Wes, their primary response was that smart buildings in cities will need to have smart materials and leverage smart materials. And what they mean by smart materials is everything from materials that are sort of self-healing and self-repairing, that can adapt to changing environmental conditions. They're talking about materials that actually are sensors or part of the sensing network themselves. So we can design smart materials that can actually help provide us information about the environment. And then perhaps even going to the extent of having some of these new materials be part of the computing that's needed to process some of the data as well. So we can think about having more computational power located at the edge of these networks rather than sort of in a centralized computing environment. And so there's a lot of very interesting materials development work underway on in this topic related to smart buildings and cities. My colleague Javad, he really talked in detail about the cybersecurity aspect of smart buildings in cities. So this idea that as we develop more intelligence, more computing power distributed throughout the cities, more intelligent algorithms, that they will actually be able to help and participate in making sure the networks are cyber secure. So from identifying cyber attacks to implementing countermeasures, both in the physical system themselves and the sensing and information networks. My colleague Dong Hyun, he spoke about the need for smart buildings to be more responsive to indoor air quality and occupant needs. And again, this is a very timely topic. So this idea that buildings, if they have more sensing and data processing capabilities, they can actually actively monitor indoor quality in more detail and also unique occupant conditions and respond accordingly. And part of this work it involves developing a more detailed understanding of how pollutants move through spaces, so the dynamics of pollutants, and also how some of these pollutants may lead to secondary chemical reactions within spaces. My colleague Yu Qing, she said that smart cities will definitely need to leverage urban scale models and digital twins. So this is a big area of work in terms of building information modeling, where we have computer representations that are very detailed in terms of what's inside of the building, how they're constructed, where things are located. And I think this is being used more and more throughout the design and construction process, these very detailed building information models. And what's not been realized yet to its full extent is how we can leverage these for the entire life cycle for buildings and cities, and also to improve operations. And this is an area where she's working in developing better models and BIM processes. My colleague Alp mentioned that lighting will be a very important, and not just lighting quantities, but the quality of lighting. So with LEDs, you may have heard of, so light emitting diodes are a lighting technology that have recently become more available and cost effective in residential and commercial applications. And so now that kind of the primary technology has been developed, there's opportunities for optimization of the quality. So we can tune the spectrum of light that comes out of these LEDs for things like improved occupant conditions. So the spectrum and the quality of light can affect our natural circadian rhythms. But it also impacts the energy efficiency, so how much energy these devices consume. So we've got sort of complex trade-offs here, and this is really the focus of Alp's work. My colleague Nathan here on the topic of sustainable smart cities mentioned this need for new construction materials and structural materials. And so when we think about improving the operation of buildings, I mentioned that was one piece of the carbon picture. But then at some point, if we make that piece small enough, then what's left is the amount of carbon that's in the materials themselves in the construction process. And so in Nate's group here, they're really focusing on reducing that embodied carbon, or the carbon that's part of the building materials itself. And one way to do that is to make more use of wood in timber construction. And so the methods that he's working on to do this involve new computational methods for early design. So we have to think in a different way about how we design these buildings and use timber so that we have buildings that have adequate and structural performance, but that can help us meet some of these carbon and climate goals. So that's what my colleagues thought in the areas that they're working in. So what do I think, and where does my work fit into this? And so my work is, as Paul mentioned earlier, is really on the control side of the mechanical systems. And so how do we, through improved controls and design of the mechanical systems, the heating, cooling, and ventilation systems, how do we make buildings more efficient and flexible? And so when I think of smart buildings, I think of buildings that are efficient and flexible. What do I mean by that? Well, this figure on the slide here first shows a typical energy profile of a commercial building. We have maybe a higher usage during the day. It's a commercial building. People are at work. Temperatures are higher, so we need more cooling in the building. An energy efficient building may use less energy during all times of the day. So we see sort of a shift from this original blue profile down to this yellow profile. If we add solar PV electric generation to that load profile, the yellow profile, what you might see is a big dip in the middle of the day here when the solar is producing electricity. And it turns out that these steep changes here, the steep drop in consumption and even going negative here, meaning that we're producing excess electricity. These steep ramping events, as we call them, these are sort of challenging for the electric grid to absorb. And so if we had a smart building, one thing that it may be able to do to help is shift energy consumption in a way that removes these sort of steep ramping events. So we might use more energy during the middle of the day and have that offset some of the energy use during the night and in the early morning periods. And so that's what I mean by flexibility, is the ability for a building to change when it consumes energy based on some information, some extra piece of information that it has. And so that's really where my work focuses, is new building control approaches to enable efficiency and flexibility. And so kind of an example question, or an example that you might think of related to this is if you told a building when energy was clean and when it was dirty, what would it do differently? How could it change its energy consumption patterns to use energy when it's clean and use less energy when it's not clean? And so the way that we do that or achieve that is by developing new control approaches that can help the building intelligently change its energy consumption patterns. And so next, I want to just highlight one of the specific projects that we've done in this area. And a lot of my past work has involved something called model predictive control. This is basically where you take a model of a building that can describe how it uses energy, and you couple this to mathematical optimization routines, and you use the model to basically try out operational strategies. What if I change the temperature set point for this device? What if I turn the system on at this time of the day? And by using the model, you basically try out many different control actions, and you find the one that achieves the objective you're interested in. It could be find the control strategy that lowers my energy use. It could be find the control strategy that reduces costs. It could be find the strategy that allows me to maximize my use of solar energy. And so this is a technology that's been developed. It's been fairly well studied over the past decade or more by a lot of researchers. But there's challenges in actually implementing this in practice. And some of those challenges are developing the detailed physics-based building energy model can be time-consuming. It can be costly. If we have a detailed model of one building, it may not be able to directly be used for another building. If we try to use these detailed models within the optimization framework, it turns out it can be very computationally intensive. So we need a lot of computers or a high performance computing environment to solve the problems. And also it can be challenging to explain the output from these. So overall, there's a need to develop methods that are more scalable, transferable, and interpretable. And that's something that we've been working on here. And so just kind of to outline three approaches, the first one is the approach that I just mentioned, where you use a detailed model directly for optimization and you arrive at the control strategies. A second approach that's being considered and studied is use the detailed model to train a machine learning model. So this is a simplified model that learns from the data produced by this detailed model. And once we end up with this simplified model, we can use that for optimization and then generate our new control strategies. The approach that we're taking in this work, I call rule extraction. So here we use the detailed model to do optimization, and we end up with a best set of control strategies. And then after we've developed a whole library of control strategies, the next step is then to feed that to a machine learning process to extract the rules. And I'll show you what I mean in a little bit here. But first, I'd like to just mention that a lot of the results that I'll show today are based off of the work that I've done in collaboration with Min-Young Yu. She's a fourth-year PhD student in architectural engineering. And the process that we developed for extracting these rules. So the idea of rule extraction is think about this process of developing a detailed data set where we know what the best strategies are. And once I have that data set, then the process of rule extraction is to look through that data set for patterns. And I essentially want to pull out any patterns that repeat and that I may be able to use over again or reuse for good performance. And that's exactly what we've done here. So we start with our full data set from the detailed optimizations. We go through a filtering process to select a subset of those solutions which meet our preferences. Once we have the subset of solutions, we group them. We use machine learning clustering algorithms to look for patterns and put these control strategies in groups. And then once we have the groups, we can train another classification model. And the classification model form, the output is basically a set of decision rules or decision trees. And that's shown at the bottom here. And I'll talk through one of these in a later slide. And so just a quick note about the building and the test case that we're looking at. It's a energy model for a 1 million square foot office building. Has a fairly typical HVAC system. And so if we took all of the control strategies that we developed and plotted them, this is what it would look like. So we have energy consumption on the y-axis here, and this is, think of this x-axis as like a total cost. And so each of these gray points represents one potential control strategy. And when I say a control strategy, think of it as the temperatures in the space that control when the HVAC system turns on and when it turns off. So each gray dot is a potential strategy. And you can see some have lower energy consumption, some have higher energy consumption and higher cost. The same points are plotted on this right figure, but with a comfort metric on the y-axis. So comfort penalty higher is bad, or I should say is worse. So points with a higher penalty mean there's more discomfort in the building. 0 would mean there's no discomfort. So the gray points are all solutions. If we apply our preferences, we end up with the red dots. And then the most preferred strategy for each day is the blue dot. And so you can see there's a lot of, a range of strategies we could select. And so this is what they would look like if you plotted them in terms of time here. So we've got the temperature set point on the y-axis and time of day on the x-axis. And so we start with 400 possible control strategies. And so these are all good control strategies, right? So these were produced by running the model predictive controller with the detailed model. So these all minimize at least one of the objectives, right? And so the next step then is to apply clustering. So we go from having 400 control strategies. After we apply the clustering algorithms, then we end up with about 30. So we've gone from 400 down to 30. And then once we have our smaller set of common patterns, the next step then is to try to decide when should we apply those common patterns. And this is the process of fitting the classification model. And so we took those 30 strategies, we generated a classification model, and essentially this is the output. This is what it looks like. It's a decision tree where you start at the top and you kind of follow the logic down the tree. And when you get to a terminal node here, the number that's predicted here at the node corresponds to a set point strategy for the building. So if we look at this rule set, we start at the top. So we included occupancy as one of our predictor variables. Occupancy less than 385. This is, remember, a large 1 million square foot office building. So 385 is a low occupancy number for this building. And so this first level, the model has basically found that a key distinguishing factor is whether or not the building is fully occupied or very minimally occupied. And in essence, this separates the weekdays when people are at work versus the weekends when they are likely at home. So that's the first branch. If we kind of dig down into this tree a little bit, you can see there's a split on future weather. So if future weather is less than 31, we follow this path. Current weather, if the current weather is less than 26 Celsius, then we follow a different path. And eventually we end up at these lower nodes here. If you follow the logic, these are basically the hot days where the past temperature was hot, so the previous day was warm, and it's forecasted that the current day is going to be warm as well. And so in these days, in order to reduce our energy expense, either through peak demand or energy use reduction, we may need to start the building up earlier. We may need to do some pre-cooling or subcooling. The temperatures maybe need to be lower in the building than they normally otherwise. And so I think that overall, what this highlights is that using this rule set, we map to these typical control strategies rather than running the full detailed optimization problem. So how well does it work? So after we generate the rules, we want to test those. And so here I've got three figures. We have the comfort penalty that we talked about earlier. We have energy consumption in the middle panel and energy cost on the right panel. And so the first piece I want to bring your attention to is the gray bar. This is sort of the default building operation without any intelligent controls, just standard schedule operations. If we compare the gray bar to the dark blue bar here, there's a large reduction in the energy cost. So implementing these intelligent controls is able to save quite a bit of energy cost. There's also a similar reduction in energy use. And you can see there was a slight increase in this comfort metric. On the next slide, though, we'll kind of put this in perspective a little bit. So it's hard to interpret what this change in the comfort penalty actually means. So we'll unpack that in a little bit here. But first on this slide, I just want to bring your attention to these large savings in cost and energy from the smart controls. And then if we compare now each of these additional colors, green, yellow, light blue, this purple and red color, these are different versions of the classification model, essentially. So what you can see is that there's a big jump in savings from running the fully detailed optimization problem. And then there is not much loss in savings when we move to using these simplified rules. So, for example, the yellow and the yellow, blue, purple, and red, these were all using different versions of the simplified rule sets that we just looked at. And so we're able to achieve almost the same energy savings and almost the same cost savings by using the simplified rule set. To look at the data a little bit more in terms of the time series, so we've got time on the x-axis now, and this first panel is showing temperature set points, and just shows the control strategy that was implemented compared to the optimal case. So there's a lot of similarities between the optimal case and the simplified rules. But what I really wanted to highlight is this lower panel here. PMV is a thermal comfort metric used in buildings. Between plus 0.5 and minus 0.5 is kind of the acceptable range. And so I've highlighted that in the gray shaded region. And what you can see is that most of the models are within the gray box during most of the periods. There are a few spikes and excursions, but those excursions tend to happen in a lot of the models, even the opt case. And so I think what that means is that it helps us basically interpret this comfort penalty result here. And it says that even though there are some variations in this comfort metric, all of these are fairly low in terms of thermal comfort degradation in the actual building. So just to summarize, we saw several simplified rule sets performed quite well, and the rules are indeed quite simple and interpretable. So, you can look at the rules and interpret the splits. The limitations of this, we need to do a lot more testing, and we didn't exhaustively explore the feature set that was used to build these models. But I think just to also comment on where we're hoping to go with this is that now that we have a simple set of rules, our thought is that if the rules are simpler and more interpretable, that it may be easier to apply these to other buildings. So rather than running the full optimization, the full model predictive control for a new building, can we take these near optimal simplified rule sets that we've developed for one building, and can we transfer or slightly adapt them to another building? And so that's an open question, something that we plan on testing. And if that works, I think the consequence or the result would be that we can help overcome some of these scalability and implementation challenges that come with model predictive control. So just to sort of conclude overall, I highlighted several technologies and opportunities. By no means is this exhausted. So this is some of the stuff going on here within the department. There's a lot more across the university and other departments that intersects with this area. Some of the challenges that I didn't touch on in detail during the talk was this idea of new construction versus retrofit. This is certainly a big challenge for smart buildings, technologies that work well when you have sort of all of the design variables and opportunities at your disposal. May not be appropriate for retrofits. So I think that's still a very challenging area. Something that we're encountering more is what I would call option paralysis. So there's a lot of products being labeled as smart and being for smart buildings. And with all these options, it's almost impossible for any one person to know the details and be able to distinguish between which ones work well or which ones serve the function that is needed. And so I think that leads to a lot of slow adoption of some of these technologies, because it's hard to pick one, right? There's also sometimes the economic opportunities and evaluations are challenging or not clear with these technologies. There can be a diverse range of incentives, even city to city and location by location. It may be cost effective for a technology to be used in one place, but not another. And oftentimes with these more complex situations, it does require coordination across multiple stakeholders and vendors. I can say though that there are a couple bright spots that I see. I think there's more demonstration projects happening in this space, looking at making individual buildings more smart, or smarter individual buildings, both retrofit and new construction. And also looking across communities, right? So it's going beyond just how can these technologies improve single buildings by themselves? How can adopting these technologies across entire communities help promote the well-being, the efficiency, the sustainability of the entire community? And so I think as we see more of these demonstration projects being completed, we'll start to learn more about the technologies that work well. We'll learn more about the challenges and how to address those. And so I think it's an exciting time, and keep your eye out for these demonstrations. And with that, I think I'll end my formal presentation here and turn it back to Paul for the Q&A.
Excellent. Thanks, Greg. I think we have a number of questions that have come in, and let's get to some of those. If you have questions that you'd like to ask, go ahead and use the Q&A tab there at the bottom of your Zoom video window, and we will try to get to as many questions as we possibly can. Greg, first let's start off with how commonly is smart buildings currently being applied of all the new construction that's going on, at least across the United States. What's the percentage that these elements are being incorporated into those projects?
Great question. I think it certainly varies across different sectors, right? And then as we saw also, there's different levels of smartness, certainly, right? So I think almost all buildings are taking advantage of advanced data analytics and automation, I think, right? So just most systems have the ability to collect more data and do some processing of that data, even if it's at a kind of a basic level. So I think that's one thing that's fairly widespread. Some of these other more advanced technologies, like the controls that I mentioned, are, I would say, not widely adopted yet, and a little bit more, up and coming. We've done some deployments in large commercial buildings. So I mentioned the 1 million square foot office buildings in large cities. But I think, still plenty of opportunity for these technologies to be adopted.
So you talked about retrofitting right there at the end. Are there different levels of maturity of smart building technology and approaches that can be applied to existing buildings?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think one of the exciting things about these control technologies is that they do tend to work, or they can work well as retrofits, right? You don't have to change a lot of the physical features of the building. You don't have to completely redo the mechanical systems or the envelope. They tend to be more, maybe some controls upgrades. Maybe there's some programming that has to happen. But I think, comparatively, that process of connecting a building and improving the controls is often lower cost than some of these more invasive measures. So I think that's something that's promising for retrofits and also new construction, of course. In the residential space, things that I think are fairly mature and being adopted more widely are things like smart thermostats. A while ago, they came out with the first programmable thermostats, and then kind of found out that they weren't being used very, very much. And one of the reasons was that they're a lot like programming an old VCR, right? A lot of clicking of buttons and things like that. And so these newer versions that you might call a smart thermostat, you can program through your smartphone or through a web interface. They're a lot more graphically oriented and intuitive. And they're finding that people are using these more and more, right? They're actually programming them which is leading to some energy savings. Things like LED lighting have reached a price point where they make sense for a lot of residential and commercial products. And so I think those are all opportunities for technologies that are available now that are suitable for retrofits. But then on the other end of the spectrum, you have things like ALPS work, where it's sort of the next version of LEDs that optimize lighting conditions based on the needs of the human occupants, right? Not just lighting levels for visual tasks, but actual, the biorhythms of people that improve our sort of our cognitive function, our well-being, and mental health. So I think there is a spectrum. Yep.
Yeah, it's good. I'm still my time on my VCR was still flashing before the technology became obsolete, so I was never able to figure that out. So it's good to hear that some of these technologies are becoming more intuitive and simpler for the users to figure out. You mentioned COVID-19 and the air quality piece of the work that you're doing. Steve Wagman is on the Zoom here. I know he thinks about this from a healthcare perspective and the air quality in hospitals and in healthcare facilities. But Any thoughts on the minimization of transmission of viruses that's going into the work that you're doing?
Yeah, great question. So I think just in general with existing technologies, I mean, there are opportunities to improve control of these airborne, particles or infectious, aerosols through filtration, right? So we can deploy filters in systems that have recirculation of air. If we make sure that we use high quality enough filters that can, take out these small particles, that can be an effective means. Spaces that don't have recirculated air and don't have, dedicated ventilation systems, we have, portable local air filters. The key there is to make sure we're picking products that have certified performance and that don't have adverse effects or that maybe remove one particle but emit another that can be harmful to health. So so there are certainly strategies that exist today that maybe we wouldn't call smart. I think the next version or the next round of these types of products that maybe we would fit into the smart buildings category is smart ventilation products where we have more close monitoring of these conditions in the space, right? So if we can actually detect when more of these particles are present in a specific zone, and we can pick from a set of intelligent ventilation strategies to reduce occupant exposure, or things like dynamically change airflow patterns, not just change the amount of air that we're putting into a space, but make a conscious decision to change how that air is moving and influence the dynamics of how the particles enter and leave the space. So I think that's kind of the next level, right? Is making these more intelligent, more responsive to the unique conditions that happen in each building, right? Buildings are very unique. The transport phenomena that happen within each building is very unique and complex. And so developing technologies and control systems that understand those dynamics and can respond accordingly, I think is kind of the next level.
Yeah. So my wife and I have this discussion all the time around the house about the perfect temperature, right? I think it's 72 degrees, right? I think that the house should be 72. She's more of a 68 person, right? So Tom asks a question, maybe a little bit along these lines. Does the modeling account for the individual occupant variation, specifically like the outlier whose comfort preferences, or some occupants who might, for example, install an electric space heater under their desk because of the control set point is too cold for them? Talk about how the model takes into account kind of the individual occupant or those outliers.
That's a great question. Yeah. So if you remember one of my slides, I had that gray box for kind of the acceptable comfort range, and it's because that there is a range, right? People have different preferences, and so I think so people have different preferences. The models can take that into account. And what we're seeing more and more now is the use of stochastic models. And when I say stochastic models, is they capture the uncertainty and the variability. So instead of just picking one of those regions or picking a single temperature, we can model different occupants and the likelihood that they will be comfortable, taking more of a probabilistic perspective on quantifying these effects. And so that's actually another area that we're doing some work in is developing control strategies that can account for this uncertainty and variation. So if we can kind of model the uncertainty and the variation, can I develop a more intelligent control strategy that instead of responding to a single number or based on a single set strict preference, can I actually respond to what most of the occupants would like, or what occupants would find most comfortable, and then figuring out how to dynamically change those values over time, I think is kind of interesting. Another related piece, I think, is more on the design side, and there is some work in more sort of personalized thermal comfort products, either having more localized ventilation and air conditioning, and sort of smaller office spaces or things like that. So I think, yeah, you bring up it's sort of one of the, it's a well-known challenge, but it doesn't have a perfect solution, because it's we can't make everybody want the same thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. A number of questions coming in about the information that's being collected or generated in these systems. So let me start with Tommy Songer's question.
Sure.
Is the idea here to use AI to observe the building over time to learn how the building performs and make automatic adjustments based on required parameters, kind of cost versus comfort, renewables versus fossil? Is that ultimately what you're working towards?
I think, yeah, that's an exciting direction, and there's a lot of work in that area, and it does overlap with my work. I think so the approach that's described there is what I would call maybe like a purely data-driven approach, where you collect as much data as you can about the building, and then develop machine learning models or artificial intelligence models that can improve the operations. I think where that intersects with my work is what we're trying to also do is embed the knowledge that we do have about buildings, and to help support the process, right? So we, as building engineers, there's a lot we know about the physics, about how buildings behave, about the preferences of the owners and the occupants. And that can help maybe reduce the amount of data that we need. It can help these algorithms learn faster. It can help them find strategies that don't violate known constraints that might exist. So I think, yeah, I think that's exactly right. There's a lot of work in that area, and trying to figure out how to do that efficiently with, without needing huge amounts of data and huge processing times is part of the challenge.
Absolutely. So, so a question here from Stuart. What are your thoughts on using a single occupancy network based on the lighting system to share data with other systems to feed into a decision tree?
Sorry, could you repeat that again? A single, actually, is it written in the?
It's in the Q&A, but it's a single occupancy network based in the lighting system to share data with other systems to feed into a decision tree.
Yeah, let's see. I think I think that could be a good strategy. So there's no I should say that what we presented with our decision trees is one one version of what that could look like, right? You could imagine having different sets of rules for different zones. You could imagine customizing and tailoring these for different building sectors, and then the information that these decision trees use to eventually decide on a strategy to implement. There's an infinite amount of possibilities there in terms of what pieces of information these rules can respond to. So yeah, I would say there's a lot of ways these can be configured, and we need to try more of these out. And if you have some ideas on what might work well in a field that you're working in, please follow up. I'd be happy to talk more.
Yeah, I know nothing about this topic. Everything I know about this topic I've learned in the last 54 minutes. So, but I'm thinking of like when you walk into an office in an office and the lights are off, but then the lights flip on, right? We know that that's an energy saving tactic, right? But then does that also trigger something in the heating and cooling system that then kicks that on? Or I don't know, in the water heater, anticipating that someone's going to need to use the water at some point, right? And have that kind of trigger a series of other regulations.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. That part of these. So a big, recent topic of interest was, or has been, developing more accurate models for occupants. And so not just the thermal comfort and their preferences, but what is their most likely action or next action going to be, right? Or how do occupants move throughout a building, different spaces? And so, part of the reason that those models have been hard to develop is because it's a hard data set to collect in the first place. So, tracking enough occupants and having them respond, and noting their preferences and what they're doing in a building, that takes a lot of effort, right, and a lot of time. And so those data sets haven't really been available to develop models. But as we improve those models, I think you're exactly right. We start to get to more predictive type of control approaches where they say, the person has entered the building, they've just opened the refrigerator, they're most likely to do X, Y, and Z next, or something. Of course, then that opens up the whole issue of security and privacy and
yeah, well, that's my next question I want to get to. We have time for about 2 more questions. I apologize that we are running up against our time here, but I want to shift to the security issue. As buildings get smarter, what are some of the top 2 cyber threats from your smart building technology in your point of view?
So that's a good question. So I think, so some buildings, I think now we're seeing, more buildings separate the networks that they use for building automation and controlling the building, separate that information technology network from maybe the general purpose public Wi-Fi network, right? That's sort of good practice. In buildings where that's not the case, I think then you just have a challenge with, people, with too many people using the same network and access, right? So I think that's a kind of a easy one that can be solved for new construction and kind of making sure we separate, IT and general purpose networks. On the, let's see, so I would say that, access control, can be a challenge. And I think another major challenge is all of these devices that are coming from different manufacturers that are maybe wanting internet connectivity. It's hard to know what cybersecurity standards that they may be implementing, if any, right? So it's hard to know which device may or may not be the next vulnerability in your network as sort of people start buying and adding more and more of these devices to their network. So I think I would say those are 2 that come to mind.
Yeah. So we are studying this. We are developing these technologies here at University Park. Has this modeling been applied to any projects at the university?
Good question. So are you referring to the specific technology that I presented on, or?
Yeah, the modeling that you've talked about.
Yeah, so we haven't done it yet on a building here at University Park. I think the more detailed control technology is what I mentioned. We were commercializing in some of the large office buildings in Chicago and New York. And so I'd say this new approach where we try to extract rules from those more detailed models, I'd say that's fairly new, and we've tested in simulation, but not in the field yet. So I think that's another opportunity is to kind of, after we do a little bit more testing and simulation to get the models and rules right, I think field testing will be very interesting.
Excellent. Greg, if people want more information about the work that you're doing, where can they go to find information about that and how they can be supportive?
Yeah, so if you're interested in, so I guess first I'll say, the architectural engineering department website has a faculty page where you can find all of the faces that you saw in my presentation today. So if there was a particular work that stood out, all of the faculty I mentioned today would be more than happy to receive direct contact from you all. So feel free to reach out directly through email. Phone is listed there as well. Email is usually the best way to get a hold of me. I think, I would say that's probably the best place to go to start with anyways. And most of the time there's links to, personal websites where maybe there's more detailed information about specific projects.
And I know Carrie and Lisa just put that link in the chat for people who might be interested in that. Great. Thanks for joining us today and for sharing all the great work that you're doing here at Penn State with our audience. We greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks again for the invitation, Paul. It's my pleasure.
Absolutely. And as a reminder, we'll be hosting additional speaker sessions in the coming weeks and months. And this program's in addition to a wide array of online networking events and career programs that are available throughout the year. You can view a full listing at alumni.psu.edu/events. Again, thanks for all you do for the university, for the glory, and for the future. We are
Penn State.